Hello there, everybody, and welcome to the very first episode of The Coin Flip, the show where the only points that matter are the ones that you're making. The concept of the show is fairly straightforward. 2 Gwent personalities, 3 prominent topics, and 1 winner, so to speak, if you want to call it that. There'll be 1 person arguing for a statement, while the other will be doing their best to debunk that very same statement. 3 rounds, 2 personalities, 1 winner. I'd like to introduce our first 2 guests on the show, each with a fierce passion for Gwent, and their very own convictions that they are ready to unleash here for you guys. From the United Kingdom, you know her well as the host of A Round of Gwent, as well as a part of the broadcast team from very many previous tournaments. She is AshCosplay. Hello, Ash.
Hello.
And on the other side of the coin, we have, from the fictional land of New Zealand, we have a very awesome up-and-coming streamer. He is often lurking at the top of the leaderboard in the Oceania ladder. Let's see, mouthful right there. He is a multiple-time Gwent Grandmaster, and he is the Guinness Book of World Record holder for the largest collection of V-necks. This is, of course, AdNauseam. How are you, AdNauseam?
Kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa.
Yes, see, as I said, he is very fluent in Elvish and other New Zealandish type dialects. And the only thing, that is a deep V, my friend. It's nice to see you. Oh, gosh. Okay, so just for the benefit of our viewers, both Ash and AdNauseam, they were only given the topics, at least 2 of the topics, rather, 24 hours ago. So they had that much time to prepare. They do not know which side of the coin they'll be arguing. And by the end of it, we'll be crowning a winner after 3 rounds. And once the topic is given, the coin will be flipped. The person supporting the statement will be going first. They'll be presenting their arguments. After that, the other side will go ahead and debunk, followed by a little back and forth, and points will be awarded essentially to the strength of the argument. It's not about being right or wrong. It's about how well you can defend your side of the board. So, without that, shall we flip the coin? Are we all ready?
No.
All right, so on that, with that, like, just resounding strike of confidence, Ash, I will let you pick heads or tails. We have that would be heads, and that would be tails. And you get to decide who goes first if you win. Otherwise, we'll defer that all the way down to AdNauseam.
I'll pick tails.
All right, so she picks tails, and that is tails. So would you like to defend the first statement, or would you like to debunk the first statement?
And the first statement is, net decking makes for a stronger game overall.
Well, there goes the spoiler. So if you...
Sorry, I thought this was...
No, it's all good. It's better that way, honest to God. But if you want to, you take that side, because
That
we'll go
should
with
be
another one.
minus 1 point for Ash.
I thought it was going to like appear on screen or something then.
And that is a point for Sean.
Yes, let's
which
go.
is lost in that deep V. All right. So would you like to defend or debunk?
I would like to defend this.
All right. So again, the first topic that we're going to be discussing right now is the statement net decking is good for Gwent. So Ash, net decking is good for Gwent. Why is it good for Gwent?
I think net decks essentially are created by the more influential members of the community. We can all agree on that. And I believe that these community members have these positions of influence because of certain elements of, quality of their content and essentially the quality that they provide within their streams, which is often at times informative. So we can think of these people who are, pioneers within the community of generally being of a high caliber of producing Gwent content, generally speaking. I'm talking about, the majority of the times these people are known for, among other things, for the quality of their Gwent. So I feel like the people who are inspiring these very well received and very what would you say, these decks which proliferate rapidly, these people are generally well informed and allowing these particular archetypes which they come up with, or these formulae that they come up with, to be tested by large groups of people, are allows us to be able to figure out things which maybe don't work for the game, things which are overpowered, and if decks do tend to proliferate in this kind of way, it allows us to be able to, or not me personally, but it allows the developers to be able to say, maybe there's a problem here. If this deck is seeing such great success, for this many people, maybe there are things that we need to be able to change here, and it just essentially allows a very, well documented study of a particular archetype in Gwent.
Well stated. Sean, what do you got?
I believe that netdecking does not make for a stronger overall game, because part of the reason that people dislike the fact that people netdeck so much is that when a new set is released, so much of the enjoyment that people derive from the game is actually being able to create an experiment with the decks by themselves. Now, this is taken away in some part by the fact that, some of the more prolific streamers or some of the other personalities in Gwent often rush to get this content out as quickly as possible and explore as many different ideas as possible. So they're almost robbed of the opportunity in which to be able to actually try out all of their different ideas and to test them on both casual and ranked. You've also got to factor in when netdecking is such a problem, like we have seen, for example, in the last patch with NR. Ladder is made up of 70 to 80% of this type of deck, talking about Henselt or Foltest, for example, and unfortunately it makes for quite a stale gameplay. You see a lot of the same interactions over and over again, and unfortunately if there's no counterplay available, which it doesn't feel like there is in this current meta, you get a lot of players getting a little bit disinterested in trying out anything new, or in fact playing the game at all. And I guess the last point as well is that netdecking is sort of a barrier to entry as well for a lot of the beginners, especially if they're playing in casual initially and the matchmaking isn't necessarily up to par. They're going to be facing decks that are much, much more powerful and much, much more optimized than something you might see without having netdecking be present in a game. And so they can feel, a little bit discouraged. They don't necessarily have the cards. They don't necessarily know where to look for the resources. They might not know who the streams are or who the websites to go to. So you'll find them be, a little bit disappointed with some of the games that they might have, because they don't know the style of deck that they're playing against there.
All right. So basically, Ash, you're saying that you're having a lot of great minds, prominent minds, people that are in the game who have been there from day one, the best builders, so to speak. They're the ones who are building these things. So you're always going to be, you'll always have great content that's readily available for people. So beginners don't necessarily need to be intimidated by playing the game. Would you like to comment on anything that AdNauseam was saying there?
Yeah, definitely. I think there are a few points which I'd like to raise, and I'd like to make it known that I'm saying this from somebody who personally enjoys coming up with off-meta decks. But I think for the overall health of the game, I think that having decks, tried and tested by thousands of people, when they're net decking, so to speak, I think that's a good thing. And I don't think that these decks would rise to prominence if they weren't strong. So like you gave the example of Northern Realms being very powerful in the last in the last patch. And I don't think that's without reason, because otherwise we would see, decks which are kind of countering the most prolific deck doing really well. But if that's not happening naturally, which we would expect, then there might be something inherently wrong with the deck, which is currently taking over the meta, as we've seen previously in patches such as the Hailstorm patch.
All right. AdNauseam, what you got, my friend? She's making some pretty solid points there.
She does indeed.
There's the fire I want. Just lots of good old-fashioned Canadian agreement.
Oh dear. I don't know if necessarily it's an issue with netdecking per se, because I guess you can also make the argument that eventually, with the proliferation of the internet as well, that the fact that the information is so readily available that it's going to be it's going to get out there regardless. So the fact that people are netdecking so early doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to be able to view or optimize their lists. And we're also talking about a relatively small card pool when we talk about games as well. So there's another limiting factor there that does sort of, make it so that netdecking isn't necessarily as as good for the game there, because you're looking at, only a select number of options, and because we've had them trying to test it, you can already discount the majority of them without actually having to go in and do it yourself. And it takes away a little bit of the fun of the game. You don't necessarily get to experiment or to try new strategies. So I don't know. I guess it comes down to personal flavor.
I think a lot of the argument, just to close this up, is that there's too much importance put on winning. I find that people are too they're too, geared up in their mind and tunnel vision towards getting victories over actually exploring. And this is one of the things that's why people, if you ever notice when things are posted on GwentDB, there's a lot of times where right next to that GwentDB title of the deck, there's always a win rate percentage, and that seems to be the most attractive feature when looking at a deck. And the thing that I really dislike about net decking, I find, is that it's with people so, hell-bent on getting a win rate, that there's just kind of an amount of lack of creativity, or there's a lack of ambition to be creative, because I know everybody who's playing these games tend to have a certain amount of creativity within them and imagination to be playing a card game with, fictional characters and whatnot, having a fictional war. But why can't they just translate that creativity to actual, building of a deck that doesn't necessarily need to win? Because there are days where I'll be on the ladder and I'll be playing a deck that's meant to win because you want to bust up on the ladder. But I'm sure you guys can agree on this. There's nothing more disgustingly dissatisfying, like just recently on the PTR, playing a copy-paste Nilfgaard Spies deck.
Nilfgaard Spies, yeah.
When all you have an entire sandbox of cards that you can play with, yet you still just go ahead and copy-paste that list. And that's
added maybe one or two new cards. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And we saw, you see a lot of people have success when they go off meta as well, and they don't net deck. Like, for example, including Igni in this current meta. A lot of people had a lot of success with that, and eventually, obviously, as people start to pick up ideas that aren't necessarily as widely used, they do become essentially the new net deck. So I guess all ideas in an environment, like you said, as competitive as this one, will eventually become staple, so long as they are considered successful.
All right, well, that concludes round one. I'm going to give this one, it was pretty evenly split down the middle. I'm going to give this one to Ash, though, because she's wearing a sweater, and I did say that sucking up is probably going to get you far in life, at least with me. So that sweater is definitely pulling on my heartstrings. So we're going to give
I made some very good points, too.
Let's make it happen. So that is round one, folks, in the books. That's Ash who took that one. Great points on both sides. So now we're going to go straight to round two, topic two. And this time the roles will be reversed. So, Sean, you'll be wearing the sweater. Ash, you'll do the V-neck. No, that's right. Not at all what I meant. Topic two is going to be defended by AdNauseam. And Ash, you're going to be trying to debunk this. So topic two is basically Mill. Mill is a healthy archetype for Gwent. Now, this one...
Oh boy, is it ever.
Yeah, I was going to say, so please bust out. I'm pretty sure that there's the majority of the sentiment for this is most likely weighted on one side. So, yeah, AdNauseam, you have the burden of representing the minority on this, most likely. So please, AdNauseam, we're all dying to know, why is Mill such a healthy and happy part of Gwent?
Well, for the small minority of monsters of you that play this on the ranked ladder, this one's especially for you. Mill serves a very interesting place in the current Gwent archetype. It's obviously deemed very hated, but it actually serves a very interesting purpose in that it keeps hyper-thin strategies in check. Lots of the different factions within Gwent have a hyper-thin strategy, and Mill obviously plays into that by drawing out your entire deck. And there aren't many strategies that you can see that will actually counter this from a deck building standpoint. So it sort of punishes people for playing as greedily as possible, which is quite interesting. It's almost your rock to the paper and scissors from that sort of argument, if you will, from a traditional, more two-dimensional game that Gwent is, just by the nature of how the board and stuff is set up. The other one is that a lot of people argue that Mill is not interactive. And whilst I would agree with this sentiment, I don't think it's any less interactive than something like Consume, for example, which doesn't do a good job of interacting with anybody's board at all. So in terms of, playing solitaire with a deck, I feel like Mill is just as bad as some of the other major players within the current meta. And it's essentially just another form of combo deck. It does take a lot of more moving pieces and a lot more time to play. But it's the same as, comboing Iris with Eridan, Minnow with, any sort of spy. It's just, I guess, maybe potentially more of a problem with the tags on the cards, not necessarily with the archetype as a whole.
All right, that's not bad. Rock, paper, scissors is usually a little bit more enjoyable than playing against Mill. Nonetheless, I'm pretty sure Muzzle is now the end-all of that game. It's rock, paper, scissors, muzzle now. I don't know if you were aware, if you got the memo. All right, so basically, right down to it, it comes down to a punishment of very popular strategies, things like Hyperthin, which is, is thinning out your deck is a very popular strategy that usually owes to winning games.
And I should point out, Flake, too, that it does allow for some very strange lines of play that you wouldn't see in any other interaction or any other, matchup. There's cases where you don't want to pull out certain cards, that you actually want to draw them. And so the sequencing and the lines of play there are actually, vastly different to what you'd see in a normal game. If you think about, let's say, SK versus monsters, pretty much how it plays out is going to be X card versus X card versus X card, and it's not going to change a whole lot. There's maybe 2 or 3 variations throughout the match, whereas against Mill, what you're finding is that the entire matchup is sort of flipped on its head, and you're seeing all these different new interactions, you're trying new lines of play and some different strategies as well.
All right, well, Ash, you have the task of being the Skellige of this argument, which is pretty much easy mode. Tell us why Mill is not a good thing for Gwent.
So lots of the points which I'm going to make have been reiterated many, many times. I think lots of people have, there's a general opinion amongst the Gwent community about Mill and its unhealthiness for the game. Although, interestingly, I just like to say this before I start my arguments, I've always been on the other side of the fence, and I don't think that Mill is that bad. But that's not what I'm arguing about today.
No, that's not how the coin dictates. Sorry.
Exactly. So, my first point is that I think we can all agree that in every traditional game, offline or even online, there have to be set boundary conditions. For example, I'll say in a game of tennis, we all know that you have to hit the ball over the net. Mill is the equivalent of hitting it through the net. It's an alternative win condition, which isn't the traditional way of winning a game of Gwent. I don't think it fits with lots of the the staple criteria that we all, abide by in a game of Gwent, where, things like having a consistent deck by building it to be able to thin itself, to zero in some cases, or just to be able to work through its deck efficiently is, generally the best way to go about things. This is kind of one of the pillars of Gwent, which is upheld in every other game. Mill is the only one which decides to break this. And it's just kind of tearing down the scaffolding of the game, essentially, giving you this alternate win condition, which is like the equivalent of hitting a tennis ball through the net, as I said before. So that is one of the main problems, I think, with that. The other thing that I probably think is that Mill is... I know this is kind of maybe not as strong a case, but I think that Mill isn't enjoyable. I think we can all agree that Mill isn't enjoyable. And the fact is that we are, at the end of the day, playing a game where, although, we can rage when we're playing against Spelletel and we can't get any of our siege supports to stay on the board, Mill is just, if it's a very binary situation. If you can't counter it and you decide to play the game, you're going to be playing a 20-minute long game of Gwent, which is, inevitably a loss because you just don't have the tools to deal with this alternate win condition when you've built your deck in, possibly a more effective way, which is actually the opposite of what you need to play against Mill. For example, a deck which works through itself really well. You're winning 90% of all your other matchups. Then you come against Mill, and that is the exact opposite of what you need. I just find that Mill is counterintuitive. It kind of just breaks through the defined rules of what we consider a game of Gwent. And I think that all games need these kind of criteria that we work within, the kind of, we need boundaries within a game, and Mill just works outside of these boundaries.
And I like that argument, because that is essentially, you're saying that the whole concept of not winning on points, but rather winning on a round 3 where your opponent is essentially completely exhausted of resources. It's a different way there. It's sort of a backdoor into winning a game. And that's a very poignant argument to make here, because people who don't necessarily, I find that a lot of the people who don't know, who do not like Mill, are people who either don't know how to play it or don't know how to beat it. Because once you figure out how to beat it, and the way to beat it is to pass earlier than you think you should be passing. That's a lot of how to beat it. And it's, I don't want to say it's like, you know, 1,000 IQ play, but you need to be an above average Gwent player to both play Mill effectively and to beat Mill effectively. And like you said, Ash, where you have to essentially sit there and take it for 20 minutes while they just embarrass you over and over. If you're too proud to hit the forfeit button, this is a game against Mill is a complete torture. But another one thing I wanted to make AdNauseam on your side was that you guys kind of both made a similar argument. Whereas AdNauseam, you said that there's nothing wrong with Mill that isn't wrong with other archetypes. For instance, like Consume, where Consume is going to essentially, you're playing a game of solitaire, so to speak. You can cover up half the board on your opponent's side and play pretty much the same way that you'd play otherwise, where there's almost minimal to no interaction on the other side of the board, which for a lot of the case for Mill is the same thing. So why is Mill getting so much hatred, whereas Consume is not necessarily getting the same type of ire?
I mean, if you think back to season 1, when Consume was at its peak, you could argue that it did maybe get the same amount of hate that Mill got there. But I would like to rebut the sort of like traditional bounds of a game that Ash brought up, because I think a great example of this, and it's the granddaddy of all card games, is Magic the Gathering.
I've never heard of this.
That has multiple win conditions. It has multiple angles of attack that you can not only attack the opponent's like board and resources, but also, excuse me, like win the game and things like that. And I would argue that that is probably the most fun and the most interactive I've ever played in terms of that. So I would say that, yeah, the fact that you can attack it from more than one way, that there is more than one win condition, I actually really, really like that about Mill. And I wish there were different ways that you could do that, not just the points total within Gwent, because I think it does limit a lot of the design space as well going forward.
I tend to agree. I came from a background of playing Star Wars CCG, where there were literally cards where if you do this, you win the game. And they were objective cards that essentially took, I mean, you invested all your resources to do that. It wasn't a matter of bringing your opponent down to a certain life total, like in many other card games, or achieving a certain point total over your opponent, like in Gwent, but there were alternative ways. And to Ash's point, that's a very interesting way of preparing a victory, or a sort of a strategy to go. On this case, Ash, if you have anything else to say, otherwise I might go for it. Attack them.
So traditionally, I'm a big fan of alternate win conditions. There are many examples of this through all of my RPG playthroughs that you can see on stream. Some people, there was a particular quest when you have to go and, I'm not going to spoil Witcher 3 for anybody, but there's a particular quest involving the Whispering Hillock where there is a particular person guarding a particular place. I spent about 2 hours trying to defeat said person, and it didn't end up working. So in the end, I decided to find an alternative path to do this. So I ended up crawling up the mountain behind this person, dropping down behind them, and then running into the place I had to get to after trying the direct line of attack many times.
That's how I used to get into bars.
What you're saying is that you're making an argument for the alternative win.
No, I'm saying I am a huge fan of alternative win conditions, but in this case, I don't think that it should, there are all different card games, all different games have, set limits into how you can win them. Some of them are less strong, as we were talking about in Magic and Star Wars CCG. And then you might have a game like chess at the other end of that, where it's very defined in how the play style is. And I feel like Gwent is somewhere in the middle ground between this and needs to define where it is. I believe that it's definitely more on the chess side of things, although there are many, many more pieces. I don't think that completely new win conditions should exist. We have the best of 3 style of play. We have the getting more opponents, more value than your opponent type of play. I don't think mill is one of the pillars which we should have as a win condition for Gwent. And also, I would also like to rebut the point that you made about it having low interactivity. There are lots and lots of archetypes within Gwent which are like this. I think that they are, so we have things such as the dwarves. Any kind of buff deck is a similar, but they're fine because they're just doing things by themselves, but they're not breaking the boundaries of the win condition. They're still going there for value. I don't think interactivity can really be brought into this argument because there are lots of uninteractive decks. They just work, getting more value than your opponent, which is one of the accepted ways of winning the game.
All right. On this note, what I want to say, I'll pretty much give you my standpoint on this, and to be completely candid, I honestly don't have as bad a problem with mill. If anybody's watched my streams, when I played Aerodin, it was my favorite thing was to queue into mill decks because once you know how to beat them, they're easy to beat. And on that case, it is like AdNauseam says, a lot of it has to do with the rock, paper, scissors. It just so happens that in this case, let's say if mill was rock is relatively unpopular, so people won't play it. But scissors is super popular in various cases. Just nobody wants to pick up that rock and take it and carry that burden. I will give this one to AdNauseam, however, because I do think that he made some valid points about the fact that the interactivity on it is low, but that is the case for a lot of other ones. So why should it be hated? It's not a bad thing. People, I think, just need to actually maybe get to know how to beat it more often rather than just sit there and, bitch on Reddit about how it's the worst thing since, something very bad, let's say. All right. In that case, so that's a 1-1, which means that we have to go to round 3. Who'd have thought that this would have happened? Maybe. On that note, here it is. So this is the round 3 where things get a little bit more silly, a little less, a little less poignant and important to the Gwent scene, but they are still matters that need resolution. So Ash and AdNauseam are going to debate this one with the same type of vigor that they did with the other ones.
And we haven't heard about this at all.
No.
We don't know what this is.
Neither of us know what this topic is.
That's correct. So they knew the first 2 topics. I gave it to them via email about 24 hours ago, so they had just that much time to prepare. They had no idea which side they're on. In this case, we're going to again revert back. So Ash, you will be arguing for this, and AdNauseam, you'll be arguing against this statement. Are you ready for this? Now, I think that nothing has kept me up longer than last night thinking about these things. This was so many different ways, but in the end, we're going to keep it to Gwent because there was on many tangents. But here's the statement that you guys are ready to discuss. The statement is, Merchant has the best beard in Gwent.
And I'm supporting this.
God, I'm against this? Are you mad?
Oh, that's right. See, this is what's so great about this show is I bet you guys right now would love to switch spaces.
Who else has a beard?
No, for me, it's just mostly...
There's only someone named Mick Beard.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, okay, I don't know if you can tell. This is easily about probably 24 hours worth of growth. Yeah, you have to look up at it, in the light, but it's there, I promise. So, all right, well, Ash, if you may, I don't know what your relationship is, your friendship with Merchant, if this is ever a point of discussion between the two of you. Sometimes his beard looks well coiffed and very, spiffy, as they say. Other times it looks like a raccoon is humping his face. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. But Ash, if you want to go for it, you're on.
I'd just like to preface this with, this is very funny for me because I often get called out by Merchant for being the biggest Merchant fangirl, and here I am defending his beard.
I promise you, I had absolutely no outside influence on this. I wrote it down. It's here. I wrote this 5 minutes ago. It's right there. But the pen is ready to go, so if you're ready to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. Well, I think over the course of, I think about the last year or so, at least the last 6 months, we've seen various stages in the evolution of Merchant's beard, and personally, I've found all of them fantastic. I think he shows the full range of beard. I don't know why you're laughing, guys. This is quite serious.
I know, I'm laughing because I'm very glad. This is an exasperation of joy that finally the hot topics are getting discussed. No more UI talk. We're done with that. We're talking about the real stuff, ladies and gentlemen.
But yeah, we've seen the full range of beard. We've seen that he can do it all and do it well. He's been able to, combine working full time, streaming full time with growing this beard to the density which we've seen. And I think that is a task like in itself. That's a full-time job, so I think he really should be commended for that. And we've also seen that it works. He's got the Viking aesthetic, just fantastic. It's something which not all of us can do. I don't know about you guys, but I couldn't pull it off. So I feel like it's something which kind of it works as a whole package.
Has anyone tried to actually pull it off though? Like, is it fake? Like, how good is the adhesive?
Stop making my arguments for me, Flake. Shut up.
Sorry.
But yeah. As I'm saying, we've seen the flexibility. We know it works as a cohesive package, and I don't think anybody else could do it better. It's really, it is part of the whole the thing. Like he wouldn't be the same without his beard, and we've seen he can embrace all forms of that.
All right. Well, that is as deep an argument as is that V on AdNauseam's shirt. So, oh dear goodness, we've just gone from G to PG, ladies and gentlemen, with that one.
I'm not sure we'll be able to show this on YouTube anymore.
Oh dear, not the one that. No, now we have to pay to see this video. That's what's happened. You need a credit card to view this. Okay, so AdNauseam, why is his beard not the best in Gwent?
First of all, as a sidebar, Ash, I think you're selling yourself short. I definitely think you could pull off the full beard, just so you know. So the reason that Merchant does not have the best beard, simply put, there is a streamer who has beard in the title of his name. McBeard, glorious man that he is, has a fantastic facial growth coming down. And there is actually more than one person that I'd like to call out for this, for the power of their beard as well, because none other than Life Coach, until very recently, was sporting a fantastic beard as well. Arguably the best, if not second best, Freddy now. Gwent player.
Oh, I thought you were saying beard.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that Freddy and I are on the same level.
Oh no, Freddy could not be more smooth. Let's be more realistic here. So yeah, potentially that's where Life Coach's downfall was shaving off the source of his power. So clearly putting lots of emphasis on his facial hair should help him regain the title of best Gwent player. And if you think about it too, I know there are a few others who have beards. There's also, I believe, Petrify sporting a little bit of Australian bum fluff. Myself, I've known to have a very juicy mustache, which I guess you can consider part of the fuller beard.
I have seen you in Movember, and the only time I ever used bleach on my own person was in that moment on my eyeballs. Though,
it was pretty dirty, I'm not gonna lie.
I thought you went and started streaming something completely different, frankly, when I saw that thing, but I won't even go down that road. But
with our powers combined, I really feel like together, all of the other beards within the Gwent community come together, and they put Merchants to shame. So.
Well, I think that in this case, maybe with this entire beard uprising that's going on, it might be a good time for me to make a call out to all the non-bearded people. We do represent the minority. We have tried for many years. I have asked on many occasions for Christmas to get a beard. Never happened. I think it ended at puberty and they forgot that part many years ago. Nonetheless, I'm going to give this last round to AdNauseam because it's not necessarily about the strength and the growth of the beard. Sometimes it's about the coif of the beard, the control of the beard. You know much how there's different archetypes of Gwent decks? There's control, there's mill, there's this. Well, people like McBeard and Life Coach, they play the control archetype of beard, whereas clearly Merchant is more swarm, very much so. So Ash, you do not need to get all shy about having to defend Merchant because you did not win this round. So at least there's that as a saving grace. But once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Ash, where can we find you online? Oh,
in hiding now. I'm AshCosplay on Twitter and AshCosplay_ on... I'm AshCosplay on Twitch and AshCosplay_ on Twitter because AshCosplay was taken. Those are probably the best places to find me.
Well, we'll find her and we'll send her hate mail. That's not true. Police, if you're listening. Okay, AdNauseam, where can we find you, my friend?
You can find me at twitch.tv/AdNauseam or on Twitter and Instagram as @_Shawnium. Nice little pun on my name there. Also, my favorite NTG card for any of you that are wondering why I picked that name.
Once again, I've never heard of that game. It must never exist. Okay, on that note, I am Flake. This has been the end of the show, and we will catch you soon with 2 other personalities and 3 brand new topics. So have a good one, and adios.